April 29, 1945, Ravensbrück, Germany. Dawn breaks as a gray haze drifts over the forests of Mecklenburg. The scent of pine mingles with the acrid tang of smoke, rising from a crematorium tucked by the lake. In the half-light, silent columns of hollow-eyed women move through muddy pathways, their every step a testament to survival against a machinery built to erase them. Inside Barrack 13, Anna Karch is waiting to die. The wooden boards beneath her are splintered, alive with the memory of the thousands who have lain here before. She shivers, clutching her thin arms, blood stiffening on a dress that no longer has a color. Another number, another body among 50,000 at the world's largest women's camp. Outside, the pop of distant gunfire fades. The SS guards are gone, abandoning their posts. The Soviets are coming. Anna doesn't know it yet, but this morning, this ordinary yet mist-soaked morning, marks the end of the unimaginable and the beginning of memory's reckoning. She does not yet know that in the years to come, her testimony born of pain and survival will challenge the world's conscience and force a reckoning with a brutal innovation, a camp engineered expressly for the rise and annihilation of women. What no one in that moment knows is this: the first women's camp in the Reich, built on sketches and doctrine, would house over 120,000 mothers, daughters, doctors, resistance fighters, and outcasts. It would become both a monument to suffering and a stage for unlikely courage. And in the darkness of the barracks, some of the guinea pigs, girls crippled for science, are clinging to life, convinced their screams will never be heard. Building Germany's invisible prison. It began years earlier, with the clatter of construction at a quiet lakeside near Fürstenberg. In 1939, on Himmler's personal orders, the SS selected this rural location for an engineering project, a camp designed to streamline the extermination and exploitation of women declared undesirable. What began as about 18 wooden barracks was engineered to become a factory for forced labor, scientific progress, and slow, systematic death. By the end of 1942, Ravensbrück contained over 10,000 women. Within 2 years, that population would surge to 50,000, a city of souls bordered by electric fences, patrolled by ferocious dogs, and patrolled by the cold authority of SS women guards. Poles, Russians, French, Yugoslavs, Norwegians, Jews, the Romani, political dissidents, and scores of Germans, mainly women and children. Over 30 nationalities, every age, from infants carried by trembling mothers to fiery partisans, now starved, shaved, and numbered. To work until death, but this was not death by immediate brutality, at least, not always. The innovation of Ravensbrück was, and remains, its horrifying efficiency. Women were set to labor for German industry. By 1944, over 70,000 mostly female prisoners were scattered across dozens of subcamps to produce weapons, repair uniforms, and build electronics for Siemens and Halske and the Third Reich's war engine. For many, death came not through the bullet, but through the body itself: starvation, dysentery, typhus, untreated wounds. Weakness became a death sentence, selections carried out by physicians for execution or medical experiments. The conditions were engineered for collapse: overcrowded barracks, up to 4 women per bunk, hundreds per building. Caloric rations below subsistence, working 12 to 16-hour shifts, systematic beatings, psychological torture, and deliberate humiliation. By war's end, almost 50,000 women had died at Ravensbrück, nearly half of those ever imprisoned there. We saw them come in alive and healthy. We saw them collapse and become ghosts. Ravensbrück survivor testimony. Failure of the civilized world. The world outside responded slowly. The Red Cross traced prisoners, but access was blocked. The Vatican protested quietly. Swedish and Swiss envoys appealed for humanitarian releases in the war's final months. Too little, too late. The SS bureaucracy calculated survival down to the calorie, to maximize months of profit before useless mouths went to the gas. The reality was quiet, persistent murder, hidden behind paper, policy, and barbed wire. The nurses and the doctors. But in those unspeakable conditions, defiance took root, not in the form of grand speeches, but in scraps of stolen medicine, code words, and forbidden compassion. Within the hell of Ravensbrück, a clandestine network of prisoner doctors, nurses, and political organizers began to challenge the system from within. Men and women who, facing death and torture for the smallest infraction, took risks that saved hundreds, smuggling food and medicine past guards, documenting atrocities for future trials using scraps of paper, warning of impending selections to hide the weakest. Among them was Stanisława Leszczyńska, a Polish midwife, and Dr. Ella Lingens, an Austrian physician. They risked their own lives daily, delivering babies, treating wounds, and providing stolen hope, even as SS doctors prowled for experimental subjects. Their technical skill and moral courage preserved a thread of humanity in an engineered system of inhumanity. A survivor later wrote, "In the camp, there was no medicine, no bandages, nothing but our hands and our will not to become animals." Political defiance, the rabbits. Perhaps the most remarkable defiance came not from scientists or statesmen, but from a group of young Polish students and resistance fighters, the so-called rabbits. Captured for underground activities, these women became the unwilling subjects for one of medicine's darkest chapters. Their legs were broken, nerves cut, wounds infected by Nazi doctors searching for breakthroughs in healing war injuries. Many died, but a handful survived, using coded signals and each other's courage to document their ordeal and preserve the truth for the world outside. The secret at Ravensbrück was not simply its scale, but the innovation of horror. For the first time in Nazi Germany, medical experimentation on women became routine, not rare. In a barrack known to the inmates as the hospital, SS doctors performed flesh-cutting experiments, injected infections into open wounds, and amputated healthy limbs, all in the name of military science. The guinea pigs, Polish resistance girls and prisoners of war, lined up, trembling and silent. Among them was Jadwiga, just 21, who whispered to her fellow captives, "If I survive, let the world know what they did here." The concept was grotesquely simple. War had torn German soldiers apart, bones shattered, infections rampant. Instead of healing the wounded, Ravensbrück sought shortcuts by destroying women's bodies in pursuit of new surgical treatments. It was innovation at the edge of the abyss. They told us, "If you scream, we'll kill you twice." I never understood what that meant until the pain came. Ravensbrück survivor, the doctors, Herta Oberhäuser, Fritz Fischer, kept meticulous notes, measuring the spread of gangrene, the effect of sulfa drugs, documenting every life ruined for possible battlefield advantage. In their notebooks, the names of living women became numbers, limbs became specimens, and the results were etched in scars that would last a lifetime. But even within these walls, courage grew. The rabbits, the Polish girls subjected to experiments, developed secret signals. Whenever the guards came for one of them, the others would sing softly, promising they would not be forgotten. A network of political prisoners smuggled scraps of paper to document every experiment, every lost life. In the depths of their agony, they made a pact. We will bear witness. Our pain will speak when our voices are gone. Resistance flourished even in silence. Doctors and nurses among the prisoners, led by figures like Ella Lingens, risked their lives to hide the wounded, swap assignments, or steal medical supplies. They risked torture, yet they called it the duty of survival. The greatest act of defiance? Hope. Do not let them write our history in their records alone. Every scar is a story, and every breath a rebellion. As the Third Reich crumbled, orders arrived at Ravensbrück. The SS guards, desperate to erase their crimes, forced more than 20,000 prisoners, the weak, the wounded, mothers with children, onto death marches, westward through thick forests. The roads were littered with bodies, those who collapsed, shot, or simply faded into the earth. Only a scattered handful remained in the camp. About 3,500 sick and starved, they could not be moved. The air was silent. Footsteps of guards faded. On April 30, 1945, the first scouts of the Soviet Red Army appeared at the gates. The final act of suffering had ended. What they found were not prisoners, but survivors, barely living, skeletal figures huddled against the cold. The Soviets entered a world frozen in horror. Crematorium smoke lingered. Documents, meticulously kept by the SS, detailed names, origins, and deaths. There were over 130,000 names in registers and testimony. Survivors, stunned and weak, lifted their heads to witness liberation, a word almost devoid of meaning until that moment. The world outside scrambled to respond. The Red Cross, the Swedish and Danish governments mobilized rescue convoys, white buses, nurses, and blankets to transport thousands of survivors to safety. Yet for those left behind, hunger and wounds lingered. Between 20,000 and 30,000 women and countless children had perished by war's end. In the hours after liberation, survivors wandered the grounds, searching for lost friends. Some wept, others sang old songs quietly, asserting life against death. A handful of women wrapped arms around each other, whispering, "We are still here. They did not erase us." In 1946, former prisoners' voices echoed in Allied courts. Anna Karch, the vanished poet, stood before a judge in Hamburg and read a poem, etched by memory, not pen, about mothers lost to the gas chamber and daughters reborn from courage. As the world listened, a judge asked, "How did you endure?" Anna replied, "There was no secret, only the decision not to become like them. Every scar, every word spoken now, is proof that they failed." The SS guards, camp officials, and doctors who commanded Ravensbrück were brought to trial. Some stood unflinching, others cowered before rows of seated survivors. 16 camp officials were convicted, sentenced to death for crimes against humanity. Every year at the Ravensbrück Memorial, survivors and families gather. The shadows beneath the pine trees hold their voices and their loss. They light candles, read names, and declare, "You are not forgotten." The ghosts of the camp become the memory of its truth. "We are living witnesses," whispers one old woman. "Tell it, so it will not happen again." For thousands of survivors, liberation brought no true end to suffering. Many died in the weeks and months that followed, starved, sick, lost to wounds both visible and hidden. For decades, the women who returned home carried scars on their bodies and memories that would fracture sleep for the rest of their lives. Few could bear to speak, yet over time voices rose in remembrance and warning. Ravensbrück became an emblem of the world's capacity for cruelty, and just as sharply, the will to resist it. Mothers told daughters their stories in broken whispers. In courtroom testimony, former prisoners held up scraps of cloth, pieces of a secret life, a doll made in the shadows, a poem sewn into a lining, a battered teddy bear that was all a child had left. Judith Sherman, one of the survivors, wrote, "Every day was a choice, to give in to despair or to offer comfort to the girl beside you. We lived by small acts of bravery. We survived by refusing to forget each other's names." The site of Ravensbrück was not left to time or convenience. In the decades after the war, survivors and their families transformed it into a memorial and place of education. Statues, rooms of testimony, and battered cell blocks now stand where the barracks once sprawled. The silence by the lake, the wind in the pines, are reminders not only of suffering, but of the refusal to be erased. Today, school children and families walk past the Carrying Woman Monument, a statue of a woman holding another, too weak to stand. It stands for endurance and for the simple, stubborn resolve to survive. Memorial ceremonies fill the grounds in April, voices mingling in every language that once echoed through the camp. Survivors instruct a new generation. None of us here is responsible for the crimes committed then, but we are all responsible for ensuring something like this never happens again. The pain does not fade, but remembering, telling, and visiting what remains have become acts of defiance in themselves, guarding against the easy slide into forgetting. Ravensbrück's legacy endures not just in stone and ceremony, but in every story saved, every name preserved, every child who learns to recognize injustice in its earliest breath. Decades have passed, but Ravensbrück's legacy weighs heavily. The absence left by 50,000 silenced lives cannot be replaced, nor should it be forgotten. Survivors and families have turned commemoration into both a warning and a commitment, insisting that this history serve as a barrier against future cruelty. Commemoration ceremonies now fill the grounds every year. Speeches echo, "None of us here is responsible for the crimes committed by the Nazis back then, but we are all responsible for ensuring that something like this never happens again. Today, this is more important than at any time in the past 80 years." Candles are lit, names are read, stories told, linking the vanished to the living, and charging new generations to hold memory as responsibility. Pain lingers through generations. Many survivors died in the years that followed, wounded beyond healing. Others shared only fragments of what they endured, letting a battered doll or a single poem speak in their place. Much of Ravensbrück has been rebuilt as a memorial. Exhibitions, recovered cells, and sculptures now stand where horror was routine. The Carrying Woman monument endures, a woman holding another too weak to walk, her face turned toward the lake. It is a testament not just to endurance and loss, but to solidarity, the refusal to abandon a fellow prisoner, even when death seemed certain. Art born of defiance remains, a poem stitched in secret, a toy for a sick child, a loaf of bread shared with one more person. Each became a quiet rebellion, a declaration that dignity cannot be crushed, even inside a camp engineered for despair. Today, Ravensbrück's story is taught to students and remembered by visitors. Each name, each scrap of testimony, stands guard against forgetting. To remember this camp is to remind the world that silence and indifference are never neutral. They are how such suffering begins again.